Okay, it is 6 o'clock, so I will call this meeting to order. And first we have public input, but let's see, do we have any public here? Yeah, it looks like there's two. We have Howard and we have Sarah. So this is public input. If anyone would like to speak to us, this is a really good time to do so. And you can just raise your little hand up there in the attendees and Rachel will let you in. So Howard, would you like to speak to us, or are you just here to listen? You can also, type something into the chat if you wish. Okay, maybe Howard is just being quiet. Okay, so no one for public input. I'll take a motion. And Howard, this is the time if you want to speak to anything on the agenda. This is the time to speak. Okay. Okay, so can I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Terry and Andy, and all in favor? Okay, that carries. And let's see, I'm going to get this little box out of the way. Okay, so we don't have petitions or delegations tonight, but we do have adoption of minutes. So this is the regular meeting minutes on February 1st. Can I have a motion to adopt? Chris and Janice, any comments, questions about the minutes? All in favor? Okay. All right, we don't have referrals from prior meetings, and so we're moving right into our zoning amendment bylaw 2734. This is for 2075 St. Paul Street. I will not read the legal description, but this is to be read a third time. We had seen this before. We sent it back to staff for some comments, and the report has come back to us. So would anyone like to make a motion here? Janice and Stuart. All right, Janice, comments?
I was just going to make the motion to read it the third time, but I don't really have anything to add to it. I thought the staff report covered the issues brought up in the public hearing quite nicely.
Okay, Stuart?
Yeah, I got nothing to add. It seemed to address all of our concerns, and yeah, I don't see any reason why we can't move forward on it.
Okay, Dirk?
Excuse me. One of the things that was in here was the drawing is at 38%. It's mentioned that the 38% cover versus 50, which is what's allowed by R3, and also the height of that sort of western portion of the new build. Are there restrictions on whether or not they can, because there's the potential for like a bait and switch, where we want to build it 38% cover, but they're allowed 50. Is there any way to kind of, hey, we like the drawing, seems like you could do it for that, let's cap it at 38%? And
okay, so the drawing, excuse me, the drawing is not the final thing. What we're doing now is the zoning. It's not the final thing. Oh, excuse me. I'm going to let Stacy comment on this if she would.
Yeah, so yes, they could change the drawing completely. So this is for zoning, so they're allowed to build anything that complies with the zoning. So yes, it could be 50%, but bearing in mind, you have height restrictions, setback restrictions, snow storage restrictions, parking restrictions, all of that plays into it. So you are approving the zoning, not the specific application.
And also the multiple family guidelines that are meant to minimize impact to neighbors also comes into play on this.
Yeah.
But then is there any point later, like when it comes and it feels like, if the whole building along first was the 13 meters, and that'd be a lot bigger than what's presented here. Is there any way to say at the development permit stage, like, no, that's too big? Or is it kind of, this is our last chance to get in front of that, give them some smaller parameters?
You could add conditions to the zoning to specify that it looked more like the design presented, but you have to bear in mind they still have to comply with the development permit guidelines too. However, as you point out, even though the development permit guidelines say it must fit with the neighborhood, or it has something like that, the zoning still allows 13 meters height. So they can build to that.
Is there a way to write in the, essentially the parameters, like, you know, we like what you presented, covering 38%, and that it's not 13 meters all the way across First? I mean, it seems reasonable.
Well, that would mean changing the whole zoning right now. And we've already given first and second reading to the R3 zone as it is right now. If we were to go back, we would have to change the zone to be more specific to this development, which is not an R3 zone. It would be a CD zone or something like that.
Stacy, another thing, could you walk through the 13-meter height, how that's calculated? Because on this slope, it's not like they can build it all the way up and then put the 13 meters on top, right? It's the
No,
calculation between the corners.
Yeah, it's an average. So an average from the four corners to the peak of the roof. So it has to go, so you do have to measure from the lowest point on the ground to the peak of the roof. So that's 3 stories or 2 stories. It would be about 10 to 12 meters from that height. And then you take the average for along First Avenue, where obviously it's shorter. So you measure from First Avenue to the peak, and then you take the average of all of those corners.
So could bring it down a bit. Janice, you're
I
muted.
was just going to say, I know that I'm gathering that Dirk is concerned about the height, obviously, of the building itself, but I believe in the report, the planning department addressed that in that most of the houses around are all 2 stories. So it's not going to be significantly higher than the rest of the neighborhood.
Chris?
Has there been a, I guess not necessarily a parking assessment, but somewhat of a traffic assessment done on that turn in from St. Paul? Recommendation 2 says the vehicle access and parking for the new building is not permitted from St. Paul Street. You know, that it's still going to access the old building. However, that's just a treacherous hill. I'm thinking more coming down, because if you're making a left-hand turn into there, somebody's going to hit you eventually. So that's my concern there is there any way to put in recommendation 2 that instead of the access for the new building, we put in access for all buildings?
Yeah, we could
Or
do
the
that.
lot?
Yeah, council could do that. That was just based on a previous recommendation from council that it be for the new building. I'm not sure of the space on the alley in order to be able to do that. I think there's room to add all of the parking up there, but I didn't look at that in detail.
Would that be too significant a change to do at 3rd reading? Would we need to go back?
No,
Okay.
because it's a condition on the zone. So no, that would not be significant.
Okay. Other questions? Dirk?
Well, then, like the 30% from 50% is not a condition on the zone?
No, that's part
How
of
is
it. That's like part of the actual zone. R3 zone says, like all R3 in the city, it has a 50% building coverage. That's common to all multifamily zones in the city. That's why it is that.
I think my hesitancy is that what is presented as the drawing, even though it's preliminary, looks good. I mean, if I were a neighbor, I wouldn't mind it being that high, 3 meters higher than an R1. But, if we pass it and it comes in, that they could build it significantly larger, I don't know, sort of goes against what we did.
Well, they do have to get all the parking back there too, right? So I think that there's going to be area required for that. That might mitigate what you're talking about, keep it closer to the 38 rather than the 50.
But I mean, a simple way to get more money for the project and make bigger spaces is to just build it up one level on that whole western 2/3. There's nothing that would stop them from doing that. And then it would more severely impact the neighbors, even though they're not significantly different than other houses around. That's a large space that's 3 meters taller. It's quite a bit bigger.
Well, I don't know whether that average calculation on that site would allow that.
Hmm.
Casey, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, it's hard to say because it depends how tall it is. But the average, I mean, it does allow you to play with the numbers a little bit because it can appear very short on one side and very large on the other, and you get an average between them. So.
Okay, right now the motion is for third reading as presented with no amendments. Anybody else want to speak to this? I mean, it's so hard to say, right? Because we say, yeah, okay, this is looking good the way it's presented, but if that's not what we end up getting, we might be very unhappy, and the neighbors might also be very unhappy. I don't know if I know Howard's on the line. I don't know if there's any comments there, but Andy.
So I would like to go back to Chris's point, and I think I would agree with him that it would be prudent to close off access from St. Paul, and that all parking and property access come in from first. The alleyway, obviously, is what we're talking about there.
Okay, Stuart.
I'm not trying to minimize the hazard of people accessing properties off St. Paul, but we do have other residents doing that already. And this existing building was already being accessed off St. Paul. And my recollection of the conversation was that it would be unreasonable to require them to develop whole new parking for that old part that they're not changing on the structure. That's what we discussed previously. I mean, we can come to a different decision, but that was the rationale when we discussed it last time, and that we just wanted anything new that was put in the property to not make the problem worse than it already is, but wasn't intended to go and redress old wrongs.
Good point. Stacy, do you have any comment on that idea of forcing all the parking to the back there, to the alley?
That what Stuart says is what was the discussion around it last time, that already they do access from St. Paul, and so the discussion was it's difficult to go back on that because it is already existing. However, I'm just looking at the mapping right now and seeing how far the alley goes back, and if they could create more parking off the alley, and they could, it looks like it, but that's hard to say. Because for now, right now, they're only showing one parking space access from St. Paul. So they do recognize that it's a challenge getting in off St. Paul anyway. But I think to take away the parking off St. Paul completely eliminates any other options for visitor parking, additional parking, getting anyone off the street. I mean, it's not snow there all year round. So it just gives a lot of advantages to the property to have another access for some other parking.
Okay, thank you. Stuart.
I'd also suggest that just having vehicle access in there would probably be something that would be desired, just even if you want to get something in there, to drop off a fridge or a couch or whatever. And I don't know whether we're going to be out there policing the fact about if they want access to access the property, whether we're actually going to go in there and force them to not actually park there. And we don't do that anywhere else. People want to park anywhere on their property on an informal basis. I mean, they've been parking vehicles there like a parking lot for years anyway. So, whether they call it an official parking spot or not, they still park there.
Yeah, something to be said for consistency. Okay, at this point, we still have the original motion with no amendments. Are we leaving that and moving on, or does someone want to make an amendment? Okay, I'm going to call the question unless anyone has any other comments. All in favor of third reading on this property? Okay, and opposed? Dirk? Okay, all right. Thank you. Good discussion, folks. All right, we are moving on to, oh no, we're not moving on to that. We're moving on to policy review. This is the employees minimum benefits policy, and that this has just been updated. Do I have a motion to approve this? Chris and Stuart, any discussion? All in favor? Okay, we've got another policy review, council minimum benefit policies. Looks amazingly similar to the changes made in the staff one. Can I have a mover? Terry and Chris, any comments? Oh, you have a comment, Dirk?
I just wondering why part that was taken out, and I remember this filling out the form for UBCM. Is there a reason why in the employee one, you submit your requisition for actual costs for meals up to a maximum of, and then for the council one and the one further down, you just claim breakfast and get the maximum from the CRA number?
Ooh, good
Seems like
point. I didn't catch that.
Nickel and dime, I
Yeah.
just wondered why it was.
We did change that at one point. We had it where initially, this goes back years, initially you had to put your actuals into a certain point. And I think actually it was Aaron Cosby who said, you know what, can we just have it like to that? Because he didn't want to keep track of receipts. But anyway, Brian or Cynthia or somebody in there?
No, it can read the same if you like it to. I mean, it's hard to track down receipts sometimes when you guys go wait for stuff. It usually gets covered into city credit cards anyway when we pre-book stuff ahead of time. So it's just this is for kind of more smaller activities, but we can make it the same as the staff one for sure.
I think that would be appropriate, I think, especially if it's covered under, city credit cards that you can't get the money back.
Yeah,
You shouldn't.
consistency is good. Stuart?
Is it possible that the extra time in tracking down and processing receipts might actually negate any savings from the $2.46 we might save every couple of years?
I
I
think
think the intention is to have them the same and just to do the CRA amount. It's just that I think some councillors did not want to do that. They wanted to just claim their actual expenses.
That was me because I was cheap. Never go. I never go to the limits.
But that's the objective, is to stop people from, gathering those receipts and attaching them and just go for the base CRA amount.
And that's a benefit to you, Elma, to your department for processing?
Yeah,
Not matter.
it's just if you feel uncomfortable with that, then,
it does for
we'll do
a
it the other way.
4-day trip that starts to add up. And really, I mean, it's so easy to take a picture of a receipt with a phone and email it. And there's no excuse for losing it or finding it difficult or putting on your seatbelts. Harder to remember sometimes.
Yeah.
I beg to differ.
Yeah, you would think it was not difficult, but it's a troublesome even from a staff perspective. Chasing small receipts is sometimes the bane of our existence here. But it's a necessary evil.
And we make it the CRA amount so that, CRA isn't known for their generosity. So by using CRA as the base rate, we feel that we're being, we're just being reasonable, right? Whether you think that's exorbitant or not. It's, it's the CRA rate.
Stuart, you had a comment?
Yeah, I mean, $20 for breakfast is not a lot of money if you're out at a conference. I mean, I don't know. You don't have to claim it.
Well, that's right. That's actually what I do pretty frequently, is that I might say, oh, okay, I spent enough that adds up to lunch, and put in lunch and then not put in breakfast or dinner, so I'm not, taking money from our taxpayers for something I didn't do. Like if you just put in breakfast, lunch, dinner, I mean, and a lot of these conferences that we go to, at least a couple of the meals are included anyway. So it's a non-issue. Stuart.
Yeah, I just think it's a lot simpler for everyone if it's just a standard amount. It's not an exorbitant amount that anyone's going to be concerned about.
Okay. Any other comments on that, Dirk?
Well, then should we go back and change the employee one? Because it's the employee one that says actual amount up to a maximum of. Don't know if we want to scrub that out. If we need to do it again, or
Comment from
it's the one
staff?
we just.
Yeah, the one we just approved. I mean, I feel like that's really a staff management staff management thing there, but Elma, you want to comment on that?
Well, if that's, like, I'm looking at the link here and I don't see that on there.
You know what page that was on, Dirk?
Do, yeah, page 23 of 87, meals and allowances. The reimbursement shall be the actual cost of the meals to a maximum allowable amount.
Oh,
Whereas the
sorry,
rest of them
I'm-
just say the CRA amount.
I'm just looking at the link that's with the document and I don't see it on there. So maybe that's a different version that got attached.
It's item 3C.
It's under the
How come I don't
policy.
see it?
3C, page 3 of that.
It's actually the policy.
It's in the policy.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, it shouldn't read that in the policy. I thought we had taken that out.
It's out of the next two, but it was in the first one. So I'm happy to go back and take it out of the first one then.
Well, if it's in
Matters.
there, if it's in there as sort of a clerical error, I think we can just direct staff to make them consistent and let it go. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, okay, so let's vote on council minimum policies the way it's written. Stuart, are you voting or you have a comment? We're all voting. Okay.
I'm
we're-
voting.
Good, good. We're voting and we're done. Okay, next, financial assistance for facilities, pools, parks policy. This is that we approve it and that further that we rescind the previous financial assistance policy. Because budget funds will be transferred to community grant funding budget. Sorry. Somebody wants to move that. Dirk moves it, a seconder.
Not really, close.
Okay.
Am I still on? Yeah, I don't like rescinding it and putting it into the grant and aid.
Okay, well,
Because it
hold on.
really,
Let's get a motion on the table and then we'll decide what we're gonna do. So
Okay.
we can vote it down or whatever. Andy, you're moving it and Janice is seconding it. I like that. Very nice. Okay, Andy, do you have some comments? And you're muted. You're muted. Andy, you're still muted.
I thought Dirk moved it.
No, Dirk has some consideration about it. So,
Okay, I'll let Janice go ahead then.
okay. Janice is muted too.
Yeah, I know. Kept pressing the bar and it wouldn't work. I actually have the same concern that Dirk has, although it might be for a different reason. Well, it will be, putting it into the community grant funding budget. Having it wherever it comes out of the budget is fine. Getting it's got good and bad sides, right? So getting it to the groups ahead of the year so that they have planning. They can look forward and plan is great, but they aren't going to know what their enrollment is until they start. And so I'm a little concerned that if we put it in the community grant funding, if we give them a 4-year layout like we tend to do, that, depending on what happens with our population and kids and everything else, that they could either rapidly overrun the amount that we've granted them, or it could go the other way too. So that's just my only concern with the putting it in a community grant. It may have to come up every single year. There's some great points to doing it that way, but I don't think we'll be able to do a 4-year outlook for them.
Yeah, I had the same concern about them not knowing the number of participants. Who else has got some comments on this? And then I want to get staff's input. Dirk.
Similar to Janice, and also that if it goes in there, it's kind of acknowledging that the TRP is just going to keep going and going and going, and we're never going to deal with it. So
Well,
I'd rather,
that was the other thing that I put in my email out to everybody, was one thing that I did want to talk about, whether we have a discussion about whether we want to try and revive that, which could have a bearing on what we do with this policy. So that's another thing, but we need to address this right now, and then we can talk about that. Terry, you had your hand up?
Well, yeah, to your email, Kathy, yes, I really think we should take another run at the TRP. It's, an ongoing frustration for a lot of people, and I don't feel that some good reasons around the grant and aid program that again caused me to be nervous. I'd like that TRP seems to be the root cause of all this. So I know that's drifting from what we have to do right now, but that's my
Well,
thoughts on it.
it isn't. If we start to look into TRP, that's a longer time frame. We need to do something about this policy for this year. So that's one of the things we could do, is figure out something to do about with it this year, and then have a commitment to start in on TRP round 87. Let's see, I think Stuart, you had your hand up, and Andy, maybe you did. Did I miss there? Stuart?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're going to be subsidizing people's recreation, then at least considering it all in the same context is probably an appropriate way to do it. I think we could improve. It probably requires we perhaps have a little bit more of a policy basis than we do for our grant and aid process. We're piling a lot of things in there, and it really is sort of just a bit of a, whims of the councillors on the day sort of rationale. I'd like to see it more grounded in the OCP and in policy. But it seems like we're funding all sorts of other groups through that process. Why not these ones? And if it's just around the number of kids, we can, we surely have enough flexibility to grant them an amount per kid if that's what's required. And then that gives them a, certainty around the number of kids. We can be flexible on that amount. And
Well, the only problem that I see with that is that we do have to budget, and we have to budget at a certain time of year, and it doesn't necessarily line up with when they know how many kids they have. So it would mean we wouldn't necessarily know what the budget number is. But I think there's creative ways to go out that we can look at. Andy, you were next.
Yeah, I was just going to text the council just to let them know that there has been renegotiations in other jurisdictions of the TRP, and I think we're probably in a stronger position now because of that to relook at it. But saying that, I just don't want us to tie into a long-term commitment with any change here tonight, so that we're in a position to be flexible. So whatever for me, whether we stick with what we had for another year, and it may be less than a year. So, as long as there's flexibility in it, I'm fine with it.
Okay, Stu had his hand up, but I want to see if anybody who hasn't spoken yet has anything to say before I go back to Stu. Chris, and then Stu.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. We can, if we put this on for this next year, and if we're seriously going to look at TRP, then I'm fine with the way it is.
Okay, Stuart.
yeah, I just don't understand the uncertainty part of it, because whatever funding mechanism we decide, it's still going to be uncertain, because we're gonna wait for whatever kids they get, and then we're going to give them the money based on that. Whether we call it in the grant and aid or anything else, it's still going to be uncertain. The process we fund them through doesn't determine or correct for that.
Fair enough. Dirk.
I think the only thing is that Janice pointed out that the grant and aid is for upcoming efforts, upcoming projects. It's not a rebate for stuff that had been done. And the only way you can rebate somebody money is to give it back to them afterwards. So it's a mirror image of grant and aid.
Janice.
I was just going to say that the way the policy is written now is we do have a defined amount that we award every year, so we can budget around it, regardless of the number of kids. And we've modified that over the years so that if there's leftover money, it gets distributed equally amongst the groups, depending on the proportion of usage that they did. So right now, the way it's written, we have a finite amount that we have available to them, whether they use it well, and we set it up so that they use the whole thing. If we put it into grant and aid, I actually initially really liked Stuart's idea about an amount per child or an amount per youth participant, but it doesn't give us any definitive budget amount, which I suspect Elmo would prefer.
Okay, so speaking of Elma, staff, what do you have some comments here for us? There's Christy. Hello.
Hi. So the reason that this one came up this year is because last year when this policy was up for renewal, council asked to look at better ways. That this fund that used to, when it was set up, used to fund quite a large number of groups, has slowly but surely dwindled, even though we keep making the application process easier and easier each year with fewer and fewer questions. It's now dwindled to 2 groups, and they consistently get very similar amounts. I mean, the swing in the amounts they get every year is very little. And we don't see their financials through this process that we have right now. The grant and aid we do. And I know that there's, for example, the youth baseball league in Trail. They're sitting on a very large pot of money, and they just keep applying for gaming or other grants every year because it's just what they do out of habit. And there's a lot of groups that do that. And then there's other groups that genuinely need a fair bit of a boost every year to cover these extremely expensive fees for Roslinders to take part. So, you know, there's a couple things. And also the suggested motion in the report is that we keep it the way it is for 2021, because that allows the groups to get used to it. So it wouldn't take place until 2022 anyways, either way.
Okay, so we could just go ahead with it as the motion is written, but then just we'll have a little discussion to see that if we do all want to go forward with TRP, and I think people do, then that would be something that we'd address, but we'd have this in place. Does that make sense? Okay, so with that, I'm going to call the question, and this is just as it's written. I do want to say I liked the phase-in part of it, and who knows, maybe we'll get a deal negotiated and it won't ever come to be a phased-in thing anyway, and we'll just have a completely new deal and this will be off the table. Anybody else want to speak to this before I call the question? All in favor, motion as stands. And opposed? Janice, you opposed? Okay, okay. All right, thank you. That was good. So does anybody want to make a motion that we strike a committee to start looking at TRP? As long as we're here. Okay.
I would do that.
Carrie makes the motion and Dirk seconds it. And what do you want the motion to say?
We relaunch efforts to re-examine the TRP to renegotiate our deal with Trail, something like that.
All right, Cynthia, you got that? And I think that'll just start as an internal conversation of us and staff and see what we end up doing. We'll probably get a little committee going on that, and sounds grand. Staff, any comments there?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we're moving on to another policy, the personal expense and travel policy, HR 11, as presented. Get a mover. Janice and Chris, any comments on this one? Chris, you good? All in favor? Okay. Okay, so now we've got our energy efficient building incentive policy. I like this one. So that we approve it as presented. Do we have a mover? We got Andy and Janice. Andy, you want to speak to it? You're muted. You're muted. Hey, you're muted. You're still muted.
I'm having technical issues too tonight, so
yeah,
that key's getting worn out. No, it looks great, and my only concern was about whether the limitations. So the idea was to take, go to a certain point, and then it would be maxed out with the amount of grant back. So I'm wondering if we should prepare to have more uptake.
You mean $45,000 is allowed for the 3 years? You're saying increase that to some financial amount?
Well, yeah, that was kind of my thought.
Okay, we can talk about that.
As
Dirk?
continuing incentive.
Okay, Dirk, comment on that?
I had this is item Buttes. I had 3 thoughts on that. One, $45,000 seems like a fair bit on the face of it, but over a few years we have a couple $1 million builds, which are not that out of the league right now to what's going on. That exhausts that pretty quickly. And given it's first come, first serve, I'd like to see it that there be a cap so you can get your 80% refund on a step 5 up to a $500,000 build. And then anything else, we're making an assumption that you could probably afford to spend a little bit more on your building permit. So if there would be a way to cap it. 2, I think that, let's see if I can find them here. I agree with Andy. I think there should be more funds because we have a huge stock of old houses that need to be retrofitted. And if we could really get the incentives going on those ones. And then do we scrap the incentive for step 2? Because that's on the chart there.
Yeah, we do when step 2 is required, right? Which is now, I think, right?
Well, the rebate said January 15th, 2021 is the end of the time window for step 2.
Right, because then I think it's required. Stacy, am I correct on that? Hopefully she's still there.
Yes. Yep, I'm still here. I'm just trying to find the mute button too. Yes. Where is it? Where is it? Yeah. Yes, that's correct. It's expired now because it's you have to reach step 2 now.
Okay. And Janice, I'm sorry, you were the seconder and I skipped you and went to Dirk because he had his little 3 up there, you know, and 3 fingers. So you want to comment?
Yeah, it was a great conversation, no problem. Yeah, not sure that I want to necessarily cap it. If we think we want to incent people to build different types of housing units in town, it's pretty quick to get one. I don't know what the limit was that up to $500,000. I mean, that's a single family house. That's not multifamily. That's not. And so, you know, if we want to incent people and give them some reasons to build multifamily units, I'm not sure that we should cut them out of the process.
Okay, Stuart?
Just on the idea of capping it, I do like that idea. You know, I think we could have something flexible enough to base it per housing unit so that we're not just driving more single family homes. But, you know, I don't think we should be exhausting our limited resources on a few really expensive builds by really rich people. It'd be good to share it around if we can. And I know some of you are more knowledgeable and engaged in this topic, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of, you know, on our zoning amendment, we had policy backup explaining why this meets our policy objectives better than other ways we could spend our money and why this was the good way to do it. And you know, it may be bleedingly obvious to others why that's the case, but it wasn't explained in the policy that I'm looking at here.
Okay, Stacy, do you want to comment on that? And also comment on the capping idea and spreading the wealth around a bit too, if you would.
Yeah. So when this policy first was enacted in 2019, that's when the report that you were probably looking for, Stuart. So I can send you that where it outlined all the policy and what the step code was and examples from other communities and all our OC policy on it. This is just a redo of the same policy, so it doesn't accompany all that other stuff. Doesn't accompany it. That's why.
Yeah, and I think we're all, you know, obviously people are enthusiastic, and it doesn't seem necessary. I'd just like to reiterate some of those key, you know, why. The whys are always important to me, and it'd be good even if they were just mentioned briefly.
Okay. Yep. And then as for the cap, yes, we could put a cap on. I guess I would be looking at what kind of cap you're thinking of. Bearing in mind, it's actually quite difficult to build a high step code house in a larger house. According to Perry, the building inspector, he had told me that the easiest way to build a step 5 house is a very small box, is with no different roof lines and no corners, and that's how you build a good step code house. I guess it's the easiest way to build one.
Sure.
I think just 2 comments. One thing we would like to incentivize is smaller houses, so I'm not opposed to that. And the big difficulty in building to step 4 or 5, if you're doing a traditional build with 2x6 studs and trying to get it to step 4 and 5 is very hard and expensive, but there are other and better ways to build that you start from scratch and build it a different way, it's more easily attainable. My understanding.
Yeah, okay. Who else has some comments on this? I think we're on to something good here with a cap that you know, incentivizes smaller houses and incentivizes and spreads the wealth around a bit so more people are motivated. Andy and then Terry.
I definitely like what Dirk mentioned about renovations. So I think that is where the biggest bang for buck will be in our community. If we are truly working towards reducing our GHGs as a community. And I think that however we can target incentives towards that as well. Because to be honest, that's for a lot of folks, you know, it's going to be a stretch to do that. And any savings that can be had would be good. Although as Stacy pointed out, the minimum requirement, and again, I don't know how this works with renovations. What level of renovation are you required to oblige by the step code? You know, I think there's probably confusion, or at least in my mind, there's confusion on how much of the renovation is necessary to commit to a step code. So, but I'd like to see the incentives targeted strongly towards that, to the renovation idea.
I'm going to see if Stacy has a comment on that. Then we're going to Terry, and then Dirk had his hand up, who may be able to address your concern there a bit, Andy. Stacy, do you have any comments on that?
So there's two parts of the policy. There's the ones for renovations, which isn't the step code. Step code is just for new builds. The one for renovations is different. It's actually, it's on it's called our EnerGuide rating that the energy assessor looks at. It's similar to step code, but it's not step code. So that's one part of the policy, and the other part is the step code for new builds. So we could increase the rebates for existing homes would be another way, or not have any caps on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Some ideas.
Yeah, we might end up sending this back to Stacy for her to be clever and come back with more ideas, because I don't think we have the expertise here to actually create that. But I'm going to call on Terry and then Dirk.
A point and a question. Yeah, I really think the home rental market is a big opportunity that we should try and support through this. So I'd love to see some work around that. And then a question for Stacy, I guess, is it based on per building? So would a multi-unit, someone mentioned it earlier, if there was a rebate per residence, so you could have a threeplex, for example, and could possibly get 3 rebate or like triplet? How does that work?
No, because the way that a energy advisor looks at a multifamily building is not per unit. It says the building as a whole. And it's even the building code requirements for it, they evaluate it different. It's a different type of building according to the building code. So I don't believe they look at it as per unit basis. And even as a building permit, when it's submitted, it's not submitted like one per unit, it's submitted the building as a whole for the building permit application. Does that make sense?
It does, but it does. I get what you're saying, but you know, I think some of the conversation before the meeting tonight about different housing mixes, right? And just to really mix it up, we're single family heavy, and if somebody had an opportunity to build a different type of housing, and again, we could create incentives for them to do it right and go step 3, step 4 per residence. Because if you built a threeplex, for example, if I have that stuck in my head, but you only had a chance at 1 rebate for the building quality, it would sort of be lost in the overall cost there.
So maybe
would help.
The cap could just be, if we did a cap, maybe the cap would just be on single family, and we'd leave multi units, maybe not with a cap, to encourage more multi units. You know, that kind of goes to what Janice was put in the note there too. Okay, Dirk, you were next. Sorry.
2 things. One in response to Janice's, though, that if there's a limited amount of funds, and this goes towards the Midtown project, then that fund is not even gonna get it partway through to the cost of the building permit for that project, I would think. So it'd be exhausted right away. And then just, yeah, to the transitioning the old stock, it's not going to be easy to do that. Just for interest sake, we had our house done and we're 12.5 times worse than a reference house. So to get to that place, it's going to be quite difficult. That's why I have a toucan and a sweater and tea.
And Morgan's wearing her jacket in the house.
She's sitting by the fire.
Okay. Okay, so we've had quite a bit of discussion about this, and I think there's some good ideas that have come out. And I wonder if perhaps rather than moving forward with this tonight, we should refer this back with give Stacy some parameters. And let me see if I just sort of reiterate them here. We want to spread the money around if we can. We want to incentivize more people rather than just one expensive house. But we don't want to discourage multifamily projects with a cap of some sort. But we don't want to use it all up on the MCON lot either. So have fun with that, Stacy.
And we may want to increase the actual amount of money available.
And we may want to increase that, which goes right into our financial plan. So Stuart and then Chris.
Yeah, I mean, we can also revisit this after a year and see how it works out. We don't have to blow the budget on it straight away. We can see what the uptake is and learn from that and adapt accordingly.
Right. And yeah, that's sort of what we've been doing, which is where we're at an adaptation point now, right?
Yeah.
Chris.
Is there any way of looking at the EnerGuide rating system differently than the step code system? EnerGuide more so for the renovation side of things, step code for new builds. I think it's going to be really hard for renovations to achieve much. It's going to be eaten up by new builds, which is fine. But I think that a little emphasis on the EnerGuide rating system and how we can incentivize that over and above.
Are you suggesting to have two funds, one that just applies to EnerGuide retrofits and one that applies to new builds? Is that what I'm just not sure what you were saying.
Yeah, just yes, right.
Okay, well, let's put that on our list for Stacy to look at.
And not making your day harder or your work more, Stacy, sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm just writing them all down just so I don't forget. So I have look at a cap on single family value in order to spread the money around. Look at improvements to the renovations side, perhaps splitting the money between new builds and renovations. And that's to basically spread the money around a bit.
Right. And then also consider increasing the fund.
Okay. Yes, I have that too, actually. Yeah.
Okay, guys, anything else? Anything else? Okay, so first we're going to vote the motion down that we had, and then we'll just refer it. Okay, so all in favor of going forward with this? Nobody. Everybody opposed? Everybody opposed. And then just motion to refer with those notes. Dirk makes it and Andy seconds it, and we're all in. Okay, that was good. Good discussion. Okay, so now we are on to purchasing consulting publicly tendered contracts policy. And this it's been slightly amended. Do I have a mover for this one? Chris and Janice. Chris, you want to comment? You're muted. We can't hear your comments.
No comment, thank you.
Hey, Janice, comments? No comments. Anybody comments? Stuart.
Yeah, I like the adding the environmental sustainability, but I have just some concerns on how it's actually going to be applied. We have stipulations regarding specifications, but we have considerations regarding environmental sustainability. And so I'm wondering how that seems to put a lot of interpretive requirements on staff. And I can envisage like two contractors bidding on the same job, offering a similar level of service, and then one coming in at a higher price, but justifying that based on their particular interpretation of their own sustainability credentials. And then staff, the policy doesn't really give them any guidance on how they're going to weigh those indefinable and sort of potentially open-ended sustainability qualities against price, which is obviously fairly fixed.
Right.
And I'm wondering if that could be perhaps tightened up by where we are looking for environmental sustainability criteria, that we actually stipulate those in some way and provide some, in the RFP, we say we're looking for, these qualities will be rated in some way, rather than just saying, hey, look, if you've got something to offer in that respect, staff are going to have to come to some unique interpretation.
Right. So it could be on the scoring sheet, right? There'll be a certain amount of points for what that says. Let's see what staff has to say about it.
Yeah, so that's exactly the point, right? This is a policy that we have all these considerations when we look to go and purchase equipment, material supplies, et cetera, in the RFP, it would specify exactly what it is that we're looking for and the standards that we're having. So all that stuff is just pointing us to say to staff, when we do RFPs, we want to have consideration about asset management planning and about environmental sustainability parameters in the purchasing or the products that we purchase. Some may be applicable, some might not be. It depends on how the RFP is basically drafted up. It also has the same thing in regards to the local content, right? Where we sit down and go, if we have a rating and we talk about we want to go local, we must make sure that we have some type of a rating matrix in that RFP evaluation criteria. And if we're not doing anything about local, because we know we can't do that, we don't put it in the RFP. So a lot of the comments that Councillor Spooner just talked about are basically would be in the actual drafting of the RFP. And this policy is just giving direction to staff to sit down and say, think about these things when you develop the standards in those RFPs.
Okay.
I think that's good. I'm glad to see those things in there too. And I think as staff works with it, it'll get a little more refined. But at least now it's in the policy where it was completely missing before. Any other comments on this? Call the question, all in favor? Okay. Okay, so now we've got our CBT CIP grant allocation policy. And that is that we approve it as presented. Do I have a mover? Somebody, put up your hand. Janice and Dirk. Okay, comments, Janice? Dirk?
Yeah, I had two. One thing we talk about every time we do this is how we average the amounts for counselors with a conflict. Do we want to have that language in there so that it is clear up front what we are going to do? And that's one. And then number two, I think that we should specify that their conflicts are only declared if there is a pecuniary interest. I don't feel comfortable with excusing yourself because your partner is part of a board and something that they believe in. That's the next step in helping that volunteer organization. Whereas if you weren't that keen to help the volunteer organization, you could help them more by giving them more money. So it just doesn't seem reasonable to be excusing ourselves for anything that's not a pecuniary interest.
Let me ask staff a question about that, because that's in the legislation, right, about what conflict of interest is. So I don't know if we can.
Yeah, well, that would be considered a non-pecuniary interest, which is a real conflict of interest. So I would say that the recommendation would be that not be put into a policy, because it just is, there's actual law on that side of stuff.
Yeah, so, I mean, we could.
I think that the problem is
we could come to an understanding as a group, right, and say that we don't expect that to happen as a group, because it's the counselor themselves that has to declare the conflict. So without putting it in the policy, but if we agree that we don't think it is a conflict. Somebody from the community comes up and says, oh, it's a conflict, you're in major trouble. Okay, Andy and then Stuart.
So we've talked about this, obviously, as Dirk pointed out a number of times. But I think staff helped us kind of last time is that if it's just so much easier and cleaner if we just declare a conflict whenever there's you know, a potential as far as the you know, just the cosmetics or the look of it. So it just you know, for me, it's just about passing the smell test, and I think that it just makes it easier and cleaner if you just say, oh well, you know, my partner's sitting on the library board, so I just don't wish to be involved in that particular decision. It just takes you out of the number, out of the count. It doesn't take you out of you know, the budget deliberations and all that stuff. Maybe the final approval it might, but again, I'd look to staff for that, and staff has helped us in the past. And I think just keeping it simple is the best way.
Yeah, Stuart.
Yeah, I mean, I've got my personal views on a lot of these things, but they may not be legal. I think it's probably better just to go with the rules, then we don't all have to have our own perspective on the different matters. I think it would help with, you know, if we are going to be utilizing a system, that maybe we do actually understand what that system is. You know, it always seems to be a bit of winging it, and would help clarify exactly the formula we're going to use when it comes to those conflicts, rather than adapting on the fly as we seem to.
Well, what we have, you know, I think we could put it in the policy if you want, where we say, okay, if there's a person has a conflict, they step out, the others that are there, they end up with an amount. That amount is then just allocated to the missing counselor. So there's still that the group doesn't suffer. They just don't participate. Dirk and then Janice, did you have your hand up? I feel like I'm missing somebody. Yeah, okay. So Dirk and then Janice.
Well, yeah, is there an actual rule? So in Andy's case with this partner on the library board, is there an actual rule that says that that is conflict, or are we avoiding it because somebody in the community is going to complain, whether they're right or not? And it's a perceived conflict, but it's not really. I mean, perceived really just means you haven't thought enough about it, I think.
Janice.
I'm just laughing. A perceived conflict is almost as bad as a direct conflict. So when I think about conflict, you know, I mean, obviously I have a partner who is a volunteer board member on a number of, with a number of our groups. He has better access to me than anybody else in the community. He can nag me all day and all night if he wants to you know, get my ear and talk about. So even though it's not, there's no financial benefit for him, there's no financial benefit for me. I mean, I like the way we've done the CBT, where, you know, there's also no detriment to the group if I step away. And having to Andy's point, having a nice, strong, you know, sort of sniff test passable conflict approach, it not only protects us as counselors in the city, but it also protects the groups. Because I think what we forget about is that, you know, people can come back and say, hey, your husband's on that board, or your partner is on that board, or you've been involved with that group and then you voted on that. And so that's a conflict because they had access to you that the rest of us don't. And so it does protect the groups as well as, you know, meeting the sniff test, right? There's no legal, if we step out, there just is no legal way to approach that or to argue that we have used our influence or been influenced inappropriately.
And it is consistent with the community charter. So, okay, any other comments on this? I have one. Mine is on page 55. It says all committee of the whole recommendations shall be final. And I think it should be once adopted by council at a council meeting, because committee of the whole, we do recommendations, we don't make final decisions. So that's the only addition I would make. Cynthia, if you would add that in. So once adopted by council at a council meeting. Andy, you want to comment?
And we've changed our minds. prior to actual adoption once or twice. So I think it's important to have a little bit of flexibility there.
Okay, so with that, that's the only change or addition we were going to make. Everyone's okay with that? Okay, all in favor as amended? Okay, no one opposed. Okay, so Cynthia, I'm assuming you got that because I didn't hear you didn't, but I also don't see you, so I don't know. Okay. If not, we'll see it in the minutes. Okay, so now we are at the scholarship fund disbursements, and that we approve the following amounts. And you can read them there. I don't need to go through them. Do I have a mover on this? This is the same. Okay, Dirk and wait, who else raised a hand? Chris. Any comments there? Okay, none for Dirk, none for Chris. Stuart.
Yeah, I just had a question. I don't know if anyone can answer me, but it seems like most of them are academic awards. I'm just wondering what the Health Awareness Award is for.
That was a Jill Spearn creation many years ago, and oh boy, I forget what it was somebody going into healthcare, I think was what it was meant to me. I could be wrong on that, but yeah, it was something for healthy lifestyle. I think that was it. It was healthy lifestyle. I think it was kind of that to do with, harm reduction, drug avoidance, all that kind of good stuff in the health field. So, Dirk?
I think my only question really in this was, what do we do with the other $750 of the council PR budget? Seemed an odd one.
Well, I don't know. We might find some use for it. I guess that would be when we put a printed newsletter in the mailboxes. I think that's where money comes for that, which we don't do regularly anymore, but we like to keep that option open. Or if I don't know, we might be doing some PR stuff around 100% renewables or, whatever. Staff want to comment?
Yeah, last year we made up a little thing and bought some swag for them for their parade. So that kind of stuff comes out of that aspect of money.
Okay, any other questions on this one? Our sponsor, and the schools are the ones who select the recipients. We give that over to them, and they do based on our criteria. Stuart.
Yeah, but we set the criteria.
Yeah, we do, and it's.
I mean, I don't need to do it right now, but potentially in the future, I'd like to see what that is. Maybe I got different ideas about the basis in which we give away our money.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember the details.
Maybe for next year, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Janice.
I was just going to say that I think that staff includes the application form in our weekly information when it comes around time. I seem to remember seeing that.
The application form from what?
So the application form with the outline of how you can apply for it and what it's for and what you need, what you need to meet, and yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on it myself, but it's good. The kids appreciate it. Okay, call the question. All in favor? Okay. Okay, so now we have got our fourth quarter budget update. Does anybody have questions or comments? Always good to see how we spend our money compared to how we budget it. Anybody have anything for that? Okay, we're moving on to invoices. We need a motion to approve the January check register report. Anybody make the motion? And then if you have any questions or comments, Janice makes the motion, a seconder. Come on, somebody put up a hand. Terry, good. Okay, anybody have questions or comments? Nope, all in favor. Okay, money well spent. Okay, so now we've got our city reports for information. So do we have any, you got the reports there, any comments or questions on the building permit report? I'm gonna go through these quickly. So if you've got your hand ready to talk about something, put your hand up. Building permit inspection report. Step code energy rebates. Bylaw enforcement report. Public works report. Water production report. Updated task list report. All right, well done. All right, we're moving into members' reports. I'm going to start with Terry.
Hi, guys. Met with the library board, and just one thing of note, I think that I wanted to bring forward. They've got a lot of they've been very busy with some HR issues, but they are installing a safety gate. They approved the installation of a safety gate at the library. Turns out they had an incident in December that was in the same bucket of, I put it in the same category as what happened at City Hall in December. So that was of interest to me. And they've signed the agreement with the city, as Brian knows. They're planning their AGM, and they're actually making a request for some pro-development regarding safety. So we're looking at, they're looking into that whole piece. And that's what I have to report from the library. And then, of course, ongoing work with OCP committee. That's been busy and good, making progress there. That's what I have to report.
Okay, great. Janice.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot since the last meeting. I attended the Midtown Transition Committee meeting, and as you may have seen, the project has gone out to tender. They're publicly available now. So, you know, the only thing really left is from our point, until those tenders come in to see if they meet the budget, is trying to push BC Housing to finalize the ownership structure of the building. Yeah, so hopefully in anticipation of getting some good tenders that come in within budget, we're hoping that we're able to start building in April or May.
Great.
It's pretty exciting after a couple of years.
Yeah. Andy, you have a question?
Yeah, regarding that, will it be a public opening of quotes for that tender?
I have no idea. That would be a question for Brian.
Mm-hmm.
So this process, the tender is actually in the name of the Lower Columbia Affordable Housing Society with us as a contributor. So I think what there is right now, the Yellow Ridge Construction has all the documents. The contractor has to approach them to get the documents. Once the documents are submitted, the tenders are submitted to that group, they're going to review it with City Spaces, and then provide council with our staff and our committee with a recommendation to move forward, and then all that stuff would go into a public meeting, because we would have to approve that at an open meeting, so we would see what the bids were and who they were and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think it's from our perspective, we're not really involved in the tender process, so we don't have a tender opening at City Hall at 3 o'clock on Thursday kind of idea, if that's kind of what you're getting towards.
Okay, answer the question. Good, thank you. Okay, Andy, you're next.
So my report is submitted, bit of a lengthy one. Thankfully, it wasn't too heavy an agenda package this week, but lots going on right now with Regional District, obviously, and with budget time, as there always is around this time of year. And I'll continue to provide updates as noted in that report. A lot of the initial budgets were struck or proposed, and now we're in a process of actually refinements. There was a lot of pressure on the services to keep their increases to a minimum 2% or maximum 2% this year or lower. And some of them have been able to do that. So there's some 0% increases for this coming year. The sensitivity around the table with the pandemic and spending in general, and the taxpayers' sensitivity to spending money is notable this year. And you know, that is kind of what most of the budgets reflect. Saying that, there's also some big projects being moved forward in which Roslyn is involved. Obviously, the Waneta expansion in the Pollution Control Center. we're waiting to hear on some major grant announcements in the next little while, which is going to be very soon, actually, with some of them. Those, hopefully are good news stories for us, and that obviously we'll be in a position to be spending more tax dollars if they come to fruition. But those projects are, that project in particular has been a long time in the wings, and let's hope that it does meet success in these grant announcements coming up shortly. So any other questions, feel free to throw them my way, and if I can't answer them, I'll certainly do my best to get the answers for them.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions on regional district stuff? I really like the the video about the announcement of the Go Electric fleets thing that Diane did with the ministers. And a question for staff: Are we looking at any of those Go Electric thing, like getting charging stations up at our public works or anything like that? Is that on our list?
Yeah, that's on our list.
Okay, great. Look good. Okay, let's see. Dirk, you're up.
Yeah, two quick shout outs to the city. One, I'm still loving the water app. And then two, the other night we did the free paint night with Steph Govan. And kudos to the city for putting that together. It was awesome. There were people from Nova Scotia on there, 122 at one point. Lots of families of four.
I didn't even
Yeah.
hear about that. That's great.
Yeah, my wife found it. It was fantastic. It was super fun and really cool. So kudos to Christy and Melissa for that one. It was awesome. And then the other stuff, the OCP. Hi, Christy. That was awesome. After the OCP meeting, Terry and I met with Janice to talk taxes and myths, and I am still enthralled. It was very fun. And then I attended a local government invasive species council of BC meeting today, because I like my invasives. And two things, the province is going to be reaching out to see about data sharing with municipalities, what they have, how they use it, what they could want. Not taxes, sorry, Janice, this would be different data. And then they've received money to do a certified safe soil program feasibility. So one of my big concerns is soil moving around, and I've seen how that affects communities' costs for invasive species management. So it's something hopefully big will happen with that. And then that's really it for me.
Okay, that's so on that invasive thing, that's a grant that someone is applying for? Who's applying for it?
It was a motion at UBCM to look at soil movement. And so the Invasive Species Council of BC, I think, has some grant money to do a feasibility, probably through Flynn Rowe and a bunch of different ministries. They got a lot of inter-ministry working groups. So
Yeah.
looking at safe soils, how to clean soil before moving it, and then also how to ensure not to move it. So yeah, they're good.
Okay, Stuart, what do you got? Are you muted or you have nothing?
I don't have anything.
Oh, good. Chris?
And I'm very light as well. I don't have anything either, other than what Janice has already spoken about. Thank you.
Okay, great. I've got a couple of things. First of all, I hope everybody had a very happy family day. You got to be relaxed, a little relaxed, and it's city folks too. Actual holiday, that's good. As you know, there was a BC Games exploratory meeting that Christy and Brian and I sat in on this morning with the City of Trail. And Wayne Naka, who was the director of sport in 2006 when our cities put on these games. Anyway, they're looking to put in another application for the 2026 games. So, we could all be dead by then. Hopefully we won't, but you never know. Anyway, so what we need to do tonight, if we're interested, is have a motion that says that we would be willing to share the hosting responsibility with Trail. In a conversation with Trail subsequently, they said it would be 50-50. So that would mean 50-50 of the financial commitment. The total financial commitment is 55,000, and the total in kind is 55,000 worth of in kind. The benefit of this, hopefully you guys got to read the thing, is basically these things end up being money comes back to the communities. And according to Trail staff, David Parahudoff said it was a really good thing for the city financially when they did it before. Now, I wasn't on council in 2006, so I don't know what it meant for Roslyn. But I do know I was involved at the Blackjack thing, and Blackjack did get some money, the legacy funds that come out of it. It's like 2,000 people come to town, so it's a big deal in terms, a big event, which would mean the hotels would be filled and all that kind of thing. Red and Blackjack have both expressed unofficial enthusiasm, and Tourism Roslyn has been informed of it too. So if someone wants to make the motion that was put in that thing I sent around earlier, that's great, or I can make the motion, somebody can second it, either way. Carrie.
I move that we support the bid for the Winter Games.
Okay, and I saw Janice as a seconder. Do you want to say anything further about it?
Yeah, I just think it's these events have an intrinsic value to them, and it's a good thing to rally the town around it. And $55,000 seems, I think we could find that money somewhere. So
we only have to find half of that, and we don't have to find it for a couple of years.
Yeah, no, I think these are great things.
Yeah, the other thing I meant to add was right now, all we're looking for is this motion. Trail is having a special meeting, so they're putting their motion together. And then over the next few weeks, the bid package itself will be put together. And Wayne Naka said he would help do that. In the conversation, Trail was saying they would take the lead on it, but then in the email that came afterwards, it sounded like it was a little more of a shared deal. So then the other thing that happens is when we put the bid package in, if we find some glaring tragic flaws that mean we can't do it, we're under no obligation at that point. So, okay, Janice and then Stuart.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that within the last 7 or 8 years, I know that Trail and Roslyn, or Trail Roslyn, the area, the East End area, hosted the senior games. Which also attracts a lot of people who travel. So Wayne may have, I don't know if the format, the funding format is the same where money comes back, but Wayne might have some more input from that because I believe he was involved in that. But certainly anecdotally, I've seen that any event that attracts kids attracts their families with them, and invariably the businesses involved in the facilities involved do very well with that. So, and it brings people to town that might not otherwise come.
Yeah, and Wayne pointed out today that it brings TV too. So he said that's a real benefit for places like Red and Blackjack and all of that. Let's see, Stuart and then Chris.
Presumably Winter Games are in the middle of winter.
February, the dates were on that thing I sent around. I forget what it was. Yeah.
I just observed that, February, our local businesses that would perhaps benefit from such a thing are already at capacity, and that, anything that brought numbers of people to town during the shoulder seasons or even in the summer would have a significant benefit to the community. And maybe there's a little bit of a bump, but when you're already full, you're already full. So I don't know what sort of extra benefit we would get by bringing more people at that time of year.
Okay, Chris?
That's a good point, Stu. I've coached in the summer games, and witnessed firsthand the economic impact that it has, and the amount of people that actually come, families and kids, and then the impact on the kids themselves was amazing to watch. Just the camaraderie and the synergy, and then you throw in some Indigenous influence as well. It was quite an amazing experience. So I'd love to see it.
Yeah, Dirk and then Andy and then Terry.
Is there a place for some of that half of the 55,000 to be contributed by some of the local businesses that stand to benefit a great deal from it? Could some of the hotels pitch in, RMR pitch in, or are we committed to that ourselves?
They don't say where the money comes from. Like they want the money goes to the society that's the organizing, the out of our motion to go forward with this, a society ends up being formed, which community members, not city and employees and council. That's how it's been in the past. Obviously, we're involved, but you know, it becomes that. So actually we didn't get into any details about where exactly the money was coming from, but I would think certainly we could ask others. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know if staff has any idea about that either, if there were any further conversations. Christy.
I think that maybe I haven't read it entirely, but one thing to keep in mind is, you know, we talk about the influx of cash to these businesses, and I think there's an influx of attention that would come to these businesses. But I believe, and don't quote me on this, I need to read into it more, but I believe there's a donation or an involvement on there. I don't know if they'll be selling lift passes or selling access to Blackjack. I believe it's just them allowing the use for those times. And then all the athletes are housed in the school district. So it's only the hanger-oners that will be booking accommodation.
Yeah, that's true. I can't remember, you know, I did the cross country, but I can't remember about the pass. Do you remember, Andy, about the passes? I thought there was some.
No, participants, I think basically it's pass free, but that's a good question because, you know, unlike our other events that we host where they don't actually pay for their passes, but they pay a registration fee.
Right.
So that's a good question. I can't remember. Certainly 20 years ago or 15 years ago, 16. But you know, from the benefit to Blackjack, it was substantial, and of course, it's a huge contribution from the community because the events. Was it a week-long event?
Well, 4 days, I think.
4 or 5 days. I mean, volunteer-wise, it takes a tremendous amount of effort. So, and to Stu's point, yeah, it is a busy time of year, but with the outdoor activities that they have at both, you know, the skiing especially, both at Alpine and cross country, they just want that guaranteed snow and quality. So the shoulder season is just too challenging to try and schedule in. So they you know, February is their traditional timing.
We don't control the date on that. Okay,
No.
Terry, Chris, and Dirk. I may have gotten our order out of it.
I just want to, the other benefit is the volunteer opportunities. So, you know, these events will pull in a ton of volunteers, and it's a chance to build community and get to know your neighbors and put your shoulder into something. So that's also a great piece of this puzzle.
Yeah, Chris and then Dirk.
And to Christy's point, they don't stay in hotels. They all stay in the schools. They stay in classrooms. They stay in gyms. So the impact on the hotels and restaurants isn't large because they eat in the gym essentially.
Well, Wayne was actually saying that the hotels do get booked up, and you know, we did ask to see if they could give us back the bid package that we put in 2006. It would help us with some things, and I don't know if we have a way of going back finding any of that. But there are, like, the coaches and the parents and everything, they stay in other places. Wayne himself has been involved with this for many years, and he says that he gave us a quote of economic benefit to the community, and it was under $2 million for winter and about 2 something or other for summer. So, and then the money that comes back in this legacy fund, then the various groups and venues and people who are involved can apply to get something back. And I remember that we did that with Blackjack last time. I can't remember how much money we got back, but it was a good chunk. So I think it went towards a new groomer. Okay, Dirk.
I don't think I had a question or comment other than be nice if others pitched in, or I can't remember what my question or comment was.
Yeah. Well, I think we can always ask. At this point, we're just like putting the feeler out there because the feeler has to be out by Friday. So we're kind of late to the party on this. And we're probably going to get it because one of the reasons the feeler came out so late is because no one has applied for the 2026 games. So, you know, but then we have to, you know, put the package together. And that could show, I mean, I don't think there's any fatal flaws because we have done it before, and we did it before when we were sort of less developed in terms of our facilities and our, you know, the community in 2006 than we are now. So we're probably in better shape. So, okay, I'm going to call the question on this, that we're going to do the motion that I put in that paper that I sent out earlier. I don't have it in front of me, so I'm not going to read it. All in favor? Okay, thanks. We'll do that. And, oh, Stuart, were you opposed?
Yeah, I'm opposed.
Okay, Stuart's opposed. Sorry, didn't mean to miss you there. Okay, so let's see. That's back to my members' reports. So I'm now having regular meetings with Red, the Josie, and Tourism Roslyn to talk about COVID issues, messaging, and compliance. We're doing it about every 2 weeks, and it's just nice to sort of, you know, touch base on that. I think Roslyn's doing really well. As Terry pointed out, there's no COVID cases in our area right now, so that's awesome. Also, we had a meeting, Brian and I were on a meeting with Ann Christie, with Dr. Bonnie and Minister Osborne, Minister Marks, and the CEO of CanWest, and the six of the resort communities, not everybody, missing Kimberly and Golden in terms of ski communities. But basically they were talking about next steps taken at resorts and the messaging about COVID and travel, and CanWest has sort of launched a ski industry campaign, which is in the information package that you should have. Let's see, there's museum development meeting. They're still working on grants. They waiting on others. They found out they didn't get some, so that's still work in progress. Let's see, Sustainability Commission organized a stakeholder meeting for the active transportation projects in the region. The intent was trying to get people signed up to be champions for the Green Link. We've already got our little portion of it with some grants that we're looking at there. But we need the other communities, you know, from Warfield, you know, all the way out to Fruitvale eventually. Anyway, there was a lot of good energy at the meeting. Tech was there, IH was there. So we'll just see what happens, and all the elected people from here to there. So that's good. Let's see. Oh, we are all going to be invited to a Zoom call with the new Economic Development Task Force as they kick off their work. I don't think that date has been set up yet. Janice has it as our liaison person. So that'll be coming, and it'd be nice. The group wants to hear from us as council to sort of give them any sort of ideas we have about what we'd like to see, you know, what we'd like to see them working on. Oh, here's a good one. I am now invited to a weekly vaccination plan update meeting with all the mayors of the Interior and with Interior Health. The first one is this coming Thursday, so I'll report on it. And I think I had mentioned in email, if any of you have any questions, we can submit our questions ahead of time. I sent you out a list of the questions that I'd come up with, but if you, you know, if you have some more, now's the time, because we don't ask them at the meeting because it's all the Interior Health mayors, but we put them in advance. So take a look at that. And that's going to be every week for a while. And then, as Janice said, Midtown project tenders out. Really exciting to see the bids. And I'm really happy to see that our plastics bylaw has been approved by the province, and it will be on our agenda in March, first meeting of March, I think. And we'll be looking at it then. At that point, we'll be adopting it and then figuring out timeline for implementation, all that good stuff. And I think that is it for members' reports. We have one release of declassified in-camera matters, and that is a resolve that council appoints the following applicants to the Sustainability Commission's Economic Development Task Force: Jim Firstbrook, Dan Ayler, Darren Recke, Derek Stufik. And that we need a motion for that. Motion to release. Andy and Janice, any comments besides that? All in favor? All in favor. And we are adjourned. Yay. Okay. All right. Thanks. Thanks, staff. That's the only thing I don't like about Zoom meetings is we really don't get to see all your smiling faces, but we love you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.